I love this moment. Big bucket of popcorn in hand, half buttered, half caramel, waiting for the movie to start. The screen goes dark, the lights go off, and then I'm off. To distant places, to imagined worlds, to new universes, to see stories unfold, to watch history like I was there, and to watch new characters be born and come to life with humor, with passion, with drama. To watch in joy, or sadness, or fear, as they enter all of our lives in unforgettable scenes and dialogue that will be in our collective memories forever.
Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
I'm gonna make him an offer again.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet.
Is this bergamot I'm getting, Chef?
Deserves got nothing to do with it. The most you ever lost, according to us.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
I'll be back.
I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
I am Iron Man.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! You shall not pass!
Here's Johnny!
King Kong ain't got shit on me! What a lovely day! Are you not entertained? Everyone!
Wait a second. Was that montage all men? Well, I made it so I can confirm that yes, it was. And you may not have even noticed that anything was missing, because the movies have historically been dominated by men. It's something we barely notice. In fact, we're more likely to take notice when there's a lack of men on screen. That becomes a topic of conversation. But a movie with no women, like none at all, happens so much that it's not even worth noting. So I wanted to try and understand this with, of course, real data. But before data comes anecdotes, alphabetically speaking. So let's take a look at some samples of what I'm talking about. I Googled 3 phrases to start exploring this topic and clicked the first link for each. Greatest movies of all time, greatest movie characters of all time, greatest movie quotes of all time. Let's see what the internet has to say about the goats of cinema. Greatest movies of all time took me to IMDb's top 250 based on user ratings. Bias sample, of course, but we're in anecdote mode right now. We'll get to data soon. Before I put it on the screen, how many of the top 25 would you guess had a woman as the star? 10? 5? Try 1. On that list, there is only one movie in the top 25 that has a female lead. And it's a movie that arguably is really led by her co-star, who got far less screen time, but became one of the most iconic movie characters of all time. So what about characters? That search took me to Empire's list of greatest movie characters, where women fared better than on the greatest movies list. Yes, they improved their performance by 100%. From 1 to 2. The 25 greatest movie characters of all time, and 2 are women, one of whom doesn't even get a name. Okay, so 1 out of the 25 greatest movies, 2 out of the 25 greatest characters. Not a good start. How about quotes? Massive jump here. 5. Yes, women are represented on HubSpot's top quotes list with a massive 5 of the top 25, assuming you include the female fish, which I'm going to, because even with it, they're at just 20%. So women obviously represent about 50% of the human population and 50% of the fish population, and yet they lead 4% of the top 25 movies, have portrayed 8% of the greatest characters in film history, and have uttered 20% of the most iconic quotes. Clearly, there's an imbalance. But here, we don't assess user reviews or editorial choices or montages made with a clear ulterior motive. Here we do data. So it's time to start collecting data and to take a deep dive into movies and gender with a spreadsheet. Want to do data analysis? We need data, something that's not driven by any users or journalists. So let's start with a list of movies. I'm going with the 50 highest grossing movies of 2022 at the box office. Now we're exploring gender dynamics for who's on the screen, so I've also pulled the top 5 credited actors for each of those movies. And for each of those actors, I've compiled their gender. And just because I was gathering data, I grabbed their birth years as well. Thank God for ChatGPT. Now, since I'm interested in trends over time, I've also pulled data for 5 years ago, 2017, and 10 years ago, and 15 years ago. So 4 years, 50 movies each, 5 actors each. We've got 1,000 data points. 1,000, I think that's a good start. Maybe one day I'll gather more and do a part 2, but for now, I think we're good. So it's time. Let's open Microsoft Excel. Voila! 1,000 data points ready to go. Movie, year, total gross, top 5 cast in billing order, and with some stereotypical conditional formatting already done. Apologies for that, but honestly, it's the easiest way to get people to quickly understand what the colors mean. I've also got a huge list of humans, their gender, their birth year, ready for VLOOKUPs, so let's add to our data table with that information. As I scroll through, you're probably getting a sense that there's more blue than pink, but let's do the math. Here's a visual of all of that data. Certainly seems to be a lot of blue, especially if you scan down the first column in each section. That would be the lead in the movie, the top billed star. So what does COUNTIF tell me? About 2 in every 3 boxes are blue. 66% of the roles in our sample, of 50 movies each across 4 years, spanning 2007 to 2022, are men. And that first column, 4 in 5 are blue. 81% of the leads in those movies are men. Honestly, that's a little higher than I was expecting, but not by much. So let's dive deeper into the data and see what else we can find. I'll give every movie a code based on the 5 lead roles, going from top billed to 5th. That code has 32 permutations, every which way you can combine 5 humans that we're categorizing just as male or female. What was the most common permutation of genders across the 5 lead performers in our data? With a score of 27, that would be male, female, male, male, male. And scanning through those movies, it does seem to be a familiar formula. Got the male hero, of course, then a female counterpart for a romantic subplot of some kind, then the villain, then the sidekick, then the sidekick's sidekick, or maybe the bad guy gets a sidekick. Grabbing silver with 23 points would be male, male, female, male, male. And in bronze, that female moves down 1 more notch in the billing. Male, 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 female, male. We're basically working through the combinations of lead male, 3 male co-stars, and 1 female co-star, who has varying negotiating power to move her around in the credits. What comes next? 15 movies in our sample with 5 male leads. Now I scrolled through those titles, and they basically fall into the categories of westerns, back when women hadn't been invented yet, war, which women don't really enjoy, men's prisons, which women definitely would not enjoy, and then whatever the heck this was. The rest of the top 10 permutations, it's basically the varied combinations of 1 male lead, 2 male co-stars, and 2 female co-stars in various order of billing. So in our top 10 most common cast permutations, men always get the lead, and men always have more roles. And in our top 4 permutations, women get at most 1 role out of the top 5. This is how you end up in a world where most of the best movies, and most of the best characters, and most of the memorable quotes at least according to the internet, is just a huge pile of dudes. Time to do the bottom 10 permutations. What combinations of gender appeared the least in this data set? Not going to drag this out because there is no twist in the plot here. You're basically looking at permutations where women have more roles than the men and or take the lead role. Women have more than half of the top 5 roles in all of the least common permutations and take top billing in 8 of the bottom 10. You knew we were headed to this, but it's still sad to look at this data. At least I'm a little sad. Not that I need to drive it home, as the trend is pretty clear, but here they are side by side. Yes, that's definitely a bit sad. And for those that are curious, the one movie in our dataset that had actresses in all of the top 5 roles? Any guesses? Here's a hint. It wrapped up an iconic trilogy. And the plot featured a daring rescue of several kidnapping victims aboard a private yacht in international waters, with the kidnappers distracted by an a cappella remake of Britney Spears' 2004 techno-pop hit, Toxic. That's right, pitches. It's Pitch Perfect 3. Okay, time to pull in another element of the data. And it's time to get a little more sad, because if you remember, I also pulled birth years, and you may have a sense of how that will turn out. So let's bust out some more sad with that chart. Here's the ages of the casts in our dataset. Simple bar chart. Ages increase as you go left to right. The count of male roles of each age in blue bars, female roles of each age in pink. The blue bars are higher than the pink. We already knew that. But take a look at the moving average of those blue bars. They reach their peak at age 45, the exact age that the Centers for Disease Control recommend that those men start getting colonoscopies, which takes a little bit of the spring out of their step. But even older men keep getting cast, with a decent amount of post-colonoscopy men getting parts, really only tailing off once they hit 70. But the women? While the men's data peaks at 45, the women's data peaks at 34 and sharply declines after. So with fewer roles to go around for that half of the population, they also seem to have a faster rotation through fame, with the women more quickly being replaced by their younger counterparts. While there are men who appear in our small sampling of data multiple times, like The Rock with 7, and Channing Tatum with 6, and Idris Elba and Mark Wahlberg with 5 each, our leading ladies are tied at just 3. Julia Roberts, Robin Wright, Scarlett Johansson, Zoe Saldana, and Taraji P. Henson. And most of those women got there in one of 2 ways, either by being part of a comic book franchise or with animated film voice work, the only exception being Julia Roberts. And the peak year for women, age 29, is actually matched in role volume by 66-year-old men. So both men and women hit an age where the opportunities start to tail off, and they are fighting for a decreasing number of significant roles in the movies. But men hit that cliff when they're eligible for Medicare, and women hit that cliff before they even turn 30. It turns out that in Hollywood, women know exactly when to feel old, and the men can actually relax a bit. They've still got it at 58. At least for 8 more years. One final chart. Let's split our dataset into 2 halves. The first for 2007 and 2012, the second for 2017 and 2022. How would this chart look then? Are things changing? Here it is. And yes, things are changing. What kind of change are we looking for? I would think that the line's flattening out, meaning that men and women of all ages are appearing on screen, meaning that actors and actresses of all ages are getting opportunities. I think that would be a good thing. Now let's take a look at the men. they've gone from the dotted blue line then to the solid blue line now. And it appears that while there was a huge presence of 40-something men in the movies back then, that curve has flattened out, with more 50-something and 60-something men appearing in movies. I'd call that a good trend. But when you look at the women, who have gone from the dotted pink line to the solid pink line, it appears things have gotten worse. While the dotted line has a nice distribution of roles for women in their late 20s through their early 40s, a solid 15-ish years to build a career, the solid line representing now rises sharply in the late 20s and falls just as sharply in the late 30s. So the men have expanded their timeline of castability, if that's a word, and the women have narrowed their timeline of castability, if that's a word. But whether it is or not, I think that merits showing the crying emoji again. So what's the good news? Is there any? Who knew that a spreadsheet could be so sad? Well, one thing I haven't shown yet is the data trend over time. We pulled data from 2007, 2012, 2017, and 2022. Are things getting better? Well, yes, they are. When we break down the data by year, women have gone from a 30% share to 40% across all roles. And they've gone from an 8% share of top billing in 2007 to 28% in 2022, which is great, but also shows how bad things were as you go farther back in time. 8%! That means that of the top 50 movies in 2007, only 4 had women in the lead. So give these women their due. It's crazy to think that they were blazing a trail to gender equality in 2007, which honestly is decades after the time I thought we had become more equal, but in a way they were. At a time when nearly no women were getting top billing, they had their names on top. One final note. What about the financials? You saw it in my spreadsheet. I've got to take a look at that, right? Well, I did, but I think I need more data to really understand that dynamic. And maybe I will if I ever do a part 2 on this topic, gathering a lot more data. But I'll point out one thing I noticed based on what's honestly a really tiny sample size to really get into the dollar side of this. What permutations of roles had the highest average box office take? I did a quick pivot to check on average box office results based on the cast, and then decided to put this at the end of the video to finish on a happy note, and here they are. And you are seeing correct. The 3 most money-making combinations of roles and gender in my dataset all had women in the lead. One had 3 women out of the 5, and one had 4. So maybe all those years of watching men take the lead led to a little pent-up demand to see women on screen. Maybe the fact that the world around us is half women, but the movies are not, led to a little more interest in what stories there are to be told around real women, or imagined women. Maybe ticket buyers, having watched men all their lives at the movies, are more likely to spend that next dollar closing the gender gap in their own viewing history. And maybe that's why the data is trending the way that it is. And in case any of those things are true, I'm leaving you with this second montage, and I think you know what it'll be. And if there's a great character or line that I missed, well, just let me know in the comments.
Thank you for your consideration.
They're called boobs, Ed.
Snap out of it!
You had me at hello.
I'll have what she's having.
On Wednesdays, we wear pink.
What, like it's hard?
It's for the best.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
Dodge this.
I volunteer as tribute!
Get away from her, you bitch!
Everything! Everything!
Look at me!
Look at me! How dare you! Close your eyes!
I am no man.
That's all.